All right, welcome back to the Randy Hahn Agenda. Our featured guest tonight is Robert Zimmerman Jr. He is the brother of George Zimmerman of the Trayvon Martin tragedy. And I tell you what, we're glad to have Robert on with us. Robert, how are you doing tonight? It's glad to have you on. Thank you so much.
Good to be here, Randy. How are you?
I'm good. So, there's a lot of talk going around. I played the opening clip from the Black Panthers. How did your family feel about that exactly when they put out $1 million bounty on your brother?
Yeah, I think their bounty was $10,000, but even if it were $1, there's kind of a twofold sentiment there. George was being portrayed as a racist by the mainstream media continually and repeatedly, and I think the best way to answer that is it's not that it surprised us that the Black Panthers did what they did. I think what surprised us more was how quiet the authorities, elected leaders, people who should have had something to say about that not being the American way. We felt really betrayed by their silence.
Yeah, well, you know what? I don't blame you. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, anytime somebody's threatening anybody's life, the authorities should step up. And,
yeah, I agree. I mean, there were lots of threats that came different ways, but I think that what made that threat in particular so disturbing was there was a clear racial distinction or line made there, and many people who had made threats previously, they were on an individual case-by-case basis, and they came in different ways: email, phone, hacked email, hand-delivered at the door, left on neighbors' answering machines, and what have you. But that particular case was disturbing because there was a racial distinction there. They're called the Black Panther, the new Black Panther Party. And there was a reward offered. And it was just, it was nonstop publicized on the mainstream media, and that really didn't help either.
Yeah, no. MSNBC had a field day with that. You know me. We talked enough times. You know me. I'm not a fan of the liberal media. So.
Right.
And I seen MSNBC publicize this thing, and I seen all these people get rich off your brother, and that bothered me.
Yeah, about MSNBC in particular, who's everybody knows now. If they don't know, they can go to gzvnbc.com. My brother's suing NBC for a lot of things, for a lot of transgressions they did that they shouldn't have done, and that the suit alleges were intentional and only for ratings. But I think MSNBC. I mean, if you want to call yourself a journalist, you have to kind of ask tough questions and push back on things that you're hearing, and there was really no pushback. It was kind of like journalists had just abdicated their responsibilities, and that was it's opened our eyes. I mean, the silver lining is that we know clearly where the lines are drawn and clearly who has what agenda. And MSNBC, we know where they stand now.
Yeah. I have my co-host Lauren here. Lauren, I know you wanted to weigh in and ask Robert a few questions. So.
Yeah, most definitely. First of all, Robert, how are you holding up? How's your brother holding up, and the whole family? Dealing with this whole saga.
Everything that has happened since I would say about March or thereabouts has been living on a day-by-day basis, and first we were concerned about our survival at the very basic level, staying alive, staying safe, staying healthy. And after there were charges brought up against George, our concerns evolved. We're holding up. We do well. We keep a very low profile. We don't interact much with our community, and we use, we use kind of our better judgment to stay out of the public eye as much as possible, except when I do things representing my family, our values, our belief system in the media, and that's because I look so much like George. But our day-to-day life is quiet. We keep very much to ourselves, and we're fortunate to be alive, and that's worked out for us.
Right, and I think obviously with the whole gun control debate going on right now in the country, what I would ask you is, how much of this do you think is it a race issue? Because obviously, Trayvon Martin's black. So how much of it is a race issue? How much of it, in your opinion, is dealing or addressing the Stand Your Ground law in Florida? And do you think that it was the liberal media, certain aspects of the liberal media, who injected or who decided to put a spotlight on this case because this was a Hispanic male who shot a black man?
I think what the leftist agenda is and always has been was to disarm or limit the ability of civilians' access to weapons. And I think that it didn't matter what vehicle they were going to drive to their party, whether it was going to be calling the Stand Your Ground law a problem because they painted George out, made him out to be a racist, or after Sandy Hook saying, we need to disarm people because one person, one psycho killed so many people, and he did, and he's a psycho. And if you don't agree with us and our prescription, then you're just insensitive to dead children. There was race was a factor, also the fact that Mr. Martin, when he died, was 17 years old, and the pictures that were circulating of him were pictures when he was around 12 years old. And I think that when you pull the heartstrings of people and say, here's this monster, George Zimmerman, clearly a racist, and look what he did to this child. Some of the children in Sandy Hook, all of the children were very young, but when you pull on those heartstrings and then label people either as blatantly insensitive or overt racist in order to win the argument, you don't really have an argument, and I don't really think you have the support of the people. I think what the left does a lot is just say, you just don't understand because of your insensitivity, or you're foolish, and therefore you don't get it. Or like some of the people now speaking out about guns like Pierce Morgan, well, I just don't understand the reason that a civilian needs to have. Well, if Pierce Morgan doesn't understand the reason, that's fine that he doesn't understand the reason, but him not understanding reasons for our rights should not infringe upon our right. Our right is to keep and bear arms. George had a weapon that night. Thank God he did. That's why he's still with us. He carried it legally. And I've learned a lot of things from a lot of different people around the country about gun control. Namely, when we talk about gun control or stand your ground or weapons, we're really having 50 different conversations. And gun culture, just like gun law, varies so much state by state, where someone in Hawaii might not feel the same about a gun or a firearm or what is known as assault rifles as somebody in Arizona or somebody in Virginia or Florida. And I know that because I moved to Florida from Virginia, where I had one way of thinking about guns when I lived in the Commonwealth, and that way is not the way people think about guns here in Florida.
Right, and you're completely right, especially with Piers Morgan. Here's an individual last week who referred to the Constitution as your little booklet. So it doesn't surprise me that he doesn't understand, or he can't fathom the concept of the Second Amendment or any of our Bill of Rights. But I think you're 100% right. In any of these shootings, whether it's the unfortunate situation that your brother was in, the mass shooting, Sandy Hook, these individuals tend to stand on the graves of these individuals who lost their lives and try to promote their agenda, whether it be race, whether it be gun control, whatever it is, and it is extremely unfortunate. And from what I've heard, and I know that some of the interviews you've done in the past, it really seems, and if you listen to the media, it kind of seems the trial has already been tried, it's already been done, and they've made up their mind. And that in most people's eyes, your brother is guilty, and he was not afforded a due process or a fair trial. At least in the media, it seems that way, aside from what I've seen with Sean Hannity. My question to you is, why do you think they're so quick to judge, even when you had like MSNBC chopping up tape, different audio clips to make it sound like they wanted it to hear, and they were moving the audio around to push the message of race, and they tried making your brother sound and portray him out to be a racist and that this was a hate crime?
Well, the news is quick to push an agenda because the news has the reputation, mistakenly, of actually informing people about facts. But the news, what news companies are actually the other half of entertainment companies. You mentioned NBC. NBC is really NBC Universal, which Universal makes movies, and then NBC makes news about their, sells the movies for them. Or you can have Fox. Fox makes movies and Fox makes news. And so there's a news side and an entertainment side to these companies. But in the boardrooms, these people, they all go to the same Christmas parties. They all have the same mentality about what they want to push. And I think people rush to judgment because they thought they were hearing facts. In fact, Trayvon Martin wasn't 12 years old on February 26th, but you see a picture of a 12-year-old, and you look at someone like George and think, how could you do that, you monster? And with that is what happened in Sandy Hook. How can you not have sympathy or compassion for what these children did? Because I'm offering you the answer. And I know that they're not even willing to contemplate what I've said all along with the Federal Air Marshal program does what the NRA does, which is put guns into the hands of the right people. Before there's any talk of what guns people should or shouldn't have, I think that the government clearly has their own role in bearing arms and in what they see and what arms they see fit to secure people. And I think they need to start giving us reasons why they think that kids should be left defenseless in schools. Schools are gun-free.
Robert, we have a caller, Candy, that wants to give you thanks. Candy, you're on the line with Robert Zimmerman Jr.
Yes?
Yes, you are.
Robert, I just wanted to commend you for picking up your brother, because it takes a lot to put yourself out there like that in front of the world. And nobody knows what really happened that night. And everybody is, judging, right? Hello?
I think that, I'm here, and I'm listening to your question. I get that question a lot.
Right. None of us know what happened. But if you look at, Trayvon's past, he's never had any violence, nothing in his life. And George, on the other hand, he's had run-ins with a cop. He beat up his ex-girlfriend. He did a lot. So
sure.
How can you say Trayvon just crushed him? He was never even violent. He never even really had any fight. But George hit a cop. He hit his ex-girlfriend.
Right. Candy.
Molestation charges.
All right, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that she brings up points that I hear a lot. He had a run-in with the cops. Yes, he did. But I think that people who just read into that headline and don't read into what happened are really missing the point about what happened, why it was ultimately dismissed. Same thing with some ex-girlfriend. He had a claim of violence against her as well, and I think you really need to read into what happened. And more of that will come out now in the proceedings. But before you make up your mind about who George was, we know very little, in fact, about who Trayvon Martin was. We know that the family's attorneys moved right away, from what I understand, to seal his school records. We know a lot of his presence online was scrapped right away. It was just erased, gone from the face of the earth. I don't know that the family or that the family's attorneys are behind that. I don't know that for a fact. But I know there was some kind of effort to kind of limit the information we had about Trayvon and his alleged no limit nigga Twitter handle.
Well,
his alleged,
listen, Robert. I'm with you. I am sick of this liberal media. I've had enough of it. Okay, that's why I reach out to you, and that's why I retweeted you. I've had enough of this liberal biased media. I've had enough of it. I can't take it anymore. You know?
Right. Well, it's irresponsible. It's irresponsible to the American people because they've divided us, and they divided us. And here's where the credibility comes into question. What Candy was alluding to, which people have asked me also before, we don't really know what happened that night. We actually really do know that there was a process by which we find out what happened that night. And the police who were sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution were actually truly now doing their jobs, we found out. And while people like Ben Jealous went out and said they never swabbed his clothes, or Al Sharpton said on BBC Panorama the police told him to go home and take a shower, or Jesse Jackson said to throngs and masses of people, he shot Trayvon Martin in the back of the head, or members of Congress and others, members of Congress and others are perpetuating the myth of this person should not be assumed credible because the person who died was black. And that's what the theme was at the time. And the word that they used to enhance or justify their position was white. They literally labeled George white. We knew Trayvon was black because the pictures that were being released of him was of a black young man, was of a black child that was maybe 11 or 12 years old. But there was only one picture of George, and it sufficed to call him white to equate his alleged race with, therefore you are a liar and we don't really know what happened that night. Well, we know now from stuff that's come out in court there actually was an investigation, surprise, surprise, NAACP. There was a really thorough investigation, surprise, surprise, Al Sharpton, and all these people who claimed that nothing was being done, that a murderer was at large, don't retract their words later and say, oh, we found out actually, in fact, that there was a lot being done by the police. And despite the pressure that the police received to charge, the police were concerned with what was, in the end, doing the right thing, following the law. If someone makes a claim, you don't take their race into consideration to say, oh, you're white, so we really can't believe you. You start to look for evidence and facts to contradict what that person says. George said in his own statements, I called and called for help and no one came to help me. Well, George doesn't know that those calls are recorded at the 911 call center when he's making his statement to police. You find something like that out later, that there are around 8 calls that have his voice on it screaming for help. George didn't know whether or not this was caught on tape when he was arrested and taken to the police station and interrogated for hours on end about exactly what happened and wrote out statements to what happened. He just told the truth. But when the questions were asked of the people in Sanford, the authorities in Sanford, why did you test the decedent for drugs and not George? Why did his body lay in a morgue until the next day as a John Doe? Why wasn't he immediately identified? And those questions were asked and those answers were not forthcoming. Then the media aided people in jumping to the conclusion of, because a white man gunned down a black child, and that's why he must be a racist, the police department must be racist.
Yeah.
The
entire
state attorney's office must be racist, and let's do something about guns right away.
Robert, I know I've got Deirdre here on the line. Deirdre is one of our frequent guests and one of our co-hosts. Deirdre, do you have something you'd like to ask Robert?
I really do. Thank you. And thank you, Robert, for coming on and talking to us.
Hi, Deirdre.
Hi. When Randy told me I was going to be on the show tonight, the first thing I thought of was, what do I know about the case? And I'm not a big MSNBC fan. If I could block it, I would. Unfortunately, you can't do that. But
right.
The image that came to mind was that 12-year-old image of Trayvon Martin, who was truly 17 at the time of the shooting. And
right.
I realized that I don't really know a lot about your brother, and you have a really unique perspective being his older brother. And I'm sort of curious. What can you tell us about George at 17? I mean, we know a lot about Trayvon, but we don't know about George.
Right. We know a lot of what's been presented or portrayed about Trayvon, and there was very little, you're right, accurately presented or portrayed about George. What most people thought that they knew was that he was a white racist, which was not, he's not white, he's certainly not a racist, he'll never be white a day in his life. But one of the other things that was kind of central to their argument was this whole notion of a self-appointed vigilante or self-appointed captain. What George is he's an idealist. He's an optimist, and he thinks that you shouldn't just accept people breaking into homes where you live left and right and sit on your hands and do nothing about it. Now, to be clear, George did not appoint himself a neighborhood watch captain. He was elected by the people who attended the organizational meeting to be their neighborhood watch liaison with the police department, because George volunteered to do walking patrols in his neighborhood. He was not on a patrol. He was not on a neighborhood watch. He was not in a neighborhood watch capacity when this incident occurred. He was going to the grocery store. But that same person who's looking out for your home while it's being broken into and thwarting robberies is the same person George has always been. He's considerate. He's chivalrous. He thinks automatically the better nature of people, and I think there's some kind of disconnect in reality as to who George has been portrayed as to who he was. One story about when George was younger, several years ago, I gave him a really nice pair of sunglasses, a very expensive pair of sunglasses. Irreplaceable is a good word for him. And he called me to say, I'm so upset, my sunglasses just got crushed by an 18-wheeler today. And
wow.
Naturally, I said, why did your sunglasses get crushed by an 18-wheeler? He said, well, because there was a woman on the side of the road, and she was having, obviously, car trouble, and I thought she might need her tire changed. So when I put my sunglasses on the hood of her car and an 18-wheeler drove by, they swept up the glasses and got crushed by, the remainder of the tires of the truck. And my question to George was, George, why wouldn't you just call, AAA or call somebody for her or ask her if she needed a phone? Why would you go out and just do something like that? And his answer was, and it's very telling, his answer was because she needed help. And George hasn't really changed in that way. That's who he always has been, and I think that's why he stepped up in this community, which was, it's sold as a gated community. It's kind of gates in our society, by and large, they kind of imply some kind of sense of security, or they wouldn't be there. And the complete opposite is what was happening. And he decided that he was not just going to accept living a life surrounded by criminals breaking into people's homes, and he's always been that guy.
Robert, I'm going to bring Kelly on the phone. Maybe a little bit different attitude. Let's just see where this goes.
Okay.
Kelly, you're on the phone with Robert Zimmerman Jr.
He says Your brother said Trayvon was sitting on him, beating him. His gun was on his waistband. How did he get his gun?
Okay, well, is that your question?
We had enough of him. So,
yeah. That's a sticking point for some people. Unfortunately, it's a sticking point for people who don't read evidence and didn't listen to my father, myself, or my brother.
Yeah.
They kind of heard, they got this sensationalized idea from someone who went on Dr. Phil and made all kinds of claims that were not accurate. George,
yeah. Well,
myself,
you know what, Robert. You're one of my friends. I'm not going to put up with those people. I'm not going to put up with a liberal media bias. All right, caller 818. What is your question? Well, that sums it up.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, Mike in 305. Mike in 305, your question for Robert Zimmerman Jr.
Hey, they let me through. I was like, listen. I said, hello?
Yeah,
hello.
you're on with Robert Zimmerman Jr. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on.
Oh, is this Robert Jr.?
Yes, this is. Hi.
Oh, yes. I was just wondering, how did Trayvon turn into the aggressor when he was a mild-mannered kid? He had no background. And George Zimmerman, on the other hand, he beat his ex-girlfriend. He hit a cop. He chased people out of the stores. He fought the police every day.
Yeah. Again, I think there's some.
I just want to know how did he go from being on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, saying these assholes all get away, got out of his car, and he never got back in the car because if he did, we would have heard it on the 911 car. He kept following him, and then all of a sudden Trayvon just turned into this. Guy who want to kill somebody.
You know what?
How you go from one to the store
I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something.
Kill him with his bare hands.
No, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something, you racist person. I'm going to tell you something. You damn right I am. You damn right I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Trayvon.
Typical redneck.
Yeah.
But my thing is this. You can't just say Trayvon was going to just be a killer. Just going to get Skittles and ice tea into it. And beat this guy with bare hands.
So what?
Trayvon was scared.
So what?
If you were getting followed in a car at night and then someone get out of their car and then continue to follow you, you're going to be scared.
You know what?
Anybody.
You know what?
There's
20 kills and 20 kids.
And then you call me racist. He runs around with the conservative treehouse, which is the racist blog site on the internet.
You know what?
Randy, the best thing I can say is that's just a kind of a perfect illustration of what I'm up against every day, and not just on this show, but on other shows. But nonetheless, I still respond to things like that because if that person what that person believes were based in reality, then I don't think George would enjoy his family's support. Unfortunately, the reason that person's so passionate about what they think happened or what they believe facts to be is because of what I said earlier. People to this day interpret news as fact and reality, when in fact it's much more entertainment than fact and reality. Facts come to light in court. The reality of evidence and how it's used, that happens in a courtroom as well. So I could sit here and talk about this piece of evidence or that piece of evidence all night. What I encourage people like that to do is to actually review factual evidence that's on my brother's website, gzlegalcase.com, and examine it to what they believe actually happened. One of your callers just said, how did Trayvon get his gun? Well, George didn't say that Trayvon got his gun. I don't think that that's an evidence. I would encourage that person to come to the same conclusion, not because they believe me, but because they've examined evidence, and that's what I keep encouraging people to do, who continue subscribing to this mythology that was sold to them by the media, that George is a racist murderer who chased down. I think Ben Crump's words are profiled, pursued, and killed in cold blood. So if you hear attorneys say that over and over again, and you hear them say that on CNN, on MSNBC, on Fox News, on all these other news companies, CBS did this awful reenactment of just, some guy that they animated to be George pulling out a gun and shooting a kid down the sidewalk, and then you call in a radio station and say, why did your brother just pull out a gun and shoot some kid on the sidewalk? I don't begrudge you for thinking that. I just direct you back to evidence that we know of now, because there actually have been proceedings in court, and we do have real evidence that you can review instead of just believing what the news says. And why I ask you to do that Because if the shoe were on the other foot and this were happening to one of your family members, you would do the same thing. You would encourage people to look at fact. You can call me a liar. You can call George a liar, all day long. The people presenting the evidence in court and the way that this evidence has come to light, they're not liars. And we're either all going to be liars at the end of the day, or we're going to have a real judicial system that presents fact. And that's where I direct people to find those facts.
Well, Robert, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something very personal. How do you feel about your brother?
Oh, I know that George. Like I said, he's George is an optimist. That's if you have to describe him in a word. I mean, maybe he thought in his mind, if criminals were kind of on notice that this was now a patrolled neighborhood, they would stop. Maybe he thought if he pulled over on the side of the road behind that lady, he could have her out of there in 20 minutes. He views the world in a very optimistic way, and I think that's what particularly hurt him. One of the things that particularly hurt him about this situation was that no one came to his aid when he was the one screaming for help, and when he was the one that had called the police and thought they would just be right around the corner,
right.
Perhaps right around the corner. But he called non-emergency. He didn't call 911, and sometimes that's what makes the response take a little bit longer. Is an officer just kind of coming out to meet someone to take a report. It's not a 911 call of something confirmed in progress. So he thought in his mind, I'm sure, maybe the police can hear me. Maybe my neighbors will come and turn on a light. In fact, that's what he said to me. Maybe someone would just turn on a light or shine a light on what was happening and say, hey, get out of here to Trayvon, and that would have been the end of it. Even to that moment, he was an optimist. I think he stopped being an optimist when he saw how the world turned on him. And I know for our family, the means by which the world turned on him that particularly hurt us was just simply by dropping a race card, by saying the decedent is black and the person who pulled the gun or pulled the trigger is white. White people are not credible. Clearly, this is a racist, and clearly anyone who doesn't agree with us is just not sensitive to the plight of African Americans throughout history, and George should pay the price for all that. He should be the whipping boy for every transgression that ever happened to any African American ever. So I feel about George that I hope he regains some of his optimism and trust, some of his trust in people like he used to be, and I know that he has to recover and take his own time to do that.
Well, Robert, would you stay with us through the break, please?
What's that? Will I say what?
Stay with us through the break.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, great. We're going to have Robert Zimmerman Jr. through the break, and be right back here on the Randy Hahn Agenda, sponsored and advertised by Toyota, Frank Marshall Hyundai, right here in Texas, Monster Drink, and ArcoGas.com.
Oppose the situation that my brother's facing, oppose the truth. Read into that I think they read a lot more into it than they should. It's not an alignment or an endorsement. I get a lot of different sources of information from a lot of different places, and the Conservative Treehouse is one of those places that I've received information from. Now, I have to weed through it.
Enough of him.
Yeah, enough of that.
Yeah, enough of that. No, what I was asking, Robert, was that when you hear that statement, and your family heard that statement from the Black Panthers, I mean, how did y'all feel? I mean,
I think some of the things that stuck out to me there, it's kind of three things. One is that, and it touches on what I said earlier when the answers are not forthcoming in the schedule that the new Black Panther Party or that some black activists want, then they jump to the government has to do its job properly this time. Mm-hmm. But now that there's actual evidence the government was doing their job the entire time, probably a much tougher job than they've ever had to have, and unfortunately Chief Bill Lee was a casualty of this situation by following his oath. now that there's evidence that the government was in fact doing their job extremely properly, extremely conscientiously, there were daily meetings about this at one point, there is no retraction. There's just dead silence. The other thing that stuck out to me was the way that the new Black Panther Party there, the thing that I think he said was that white America is now on notice. So Obama, you have to do the right thing this time. And it concerns me that, if a white group went out and said something like that, Black America, you're now on notice, and, Bush, you need to do the right thing. It concerns me that there would be a backlash, either by Bush or, by his surrogates or other people in government that would say, in fact, this is a country of laws, and people who investigate alleged crimes need the time to do their job properly and the right tools to do their job properly, and they need to come to an informed conclusion. They don't need to come to your conclusion lest you call them a racist. Now, one of the things that he said in there, which I've always said the geography is a very important element in this whole situation. Sanford was brought up. Sanford, I don't know everything about the history of Sanford enough to say, in this situation, this happened, in that situation, that happened, but I do know enough about one situation, and that's what happened with Sherman Ware. And this is why some people who are Black and some people who are mixed race, like my brother, thought that the police were having a problem there in Sanford. There was a man who was homeless named Sherman Ware who was beaten. He was beaten by a police lieutenant's son who happened to be white. He was not arrested initially. He wasn't charged. It ended up, eventually he did get charged, but that didn't happen before my brother went to Black churches and gave them flyers, gave the people that attended the Black churches flyers saying exactly what had happened in this situation. That caught on tape was a police lieutenant's son, someone high up in the department, was beating a person, and either because this person was Black or either because this person was homeless, they didn't have the same equal access to justice that anyone else would enjoy. Now, in that situation, there is, at least if you take that one situation, that would seem to be evidence that there was some kind of problem that Sanford, Florida had, or it's evidence that leads people to believe that there's some kind of a problem. That chief at the time was controlling his subordinates or unwilling to charge his subordinates' children.
Yeah,
now, George was so disturbed by that. Well, he was so disturbed by that, he actually went to City Hall and he demanded that the pension of the chief be revoked. And I think that's what I meant about earlier saying that George is an optimist and that George does the right thing despite having to go take on the NAACP and ask them for help. And what does the NAACP say? The same ones who are marching in the street or have their CEO saying that nothing was done. The NAACP says, we don't have, in writing, by the way, we don't have the resources to help you with this one person. Why? Because I don't know why. I can't get into their minds. But George made sure he had the resources to help a Black man who was homeless, despite the NAACP turning a blind eye to the plight of Sherman Ware.
That's a great point. Deirdre, would you like to weigh in?
Well, I think that, context is everything. And, for about a week, or over a week, this was purely a local story before it broke into the national media. So this was really something only Sanford was involved in. Was there this kind of rage during that time, or was it only until the AP story hit on the 8th?
I think what happened was a couple things came together. There is a law in Florida known as the Stand Your Ground statute. Mm-hmm. There's also a man by the name of Ryan Jewelison. Now, an attorney was contacted, and I'll take them at their word. The attorney was contacted by members of Trayvon Martin's family to help them with How do you ask the right questions from the police regarding the death of your son? Also, a media consultant, a public relations specialist was consulted at the same time. And I can only come to one conclusion myself rationally why you would call a media consultant who strategizes public relations campaigns when you're trying to get the police to investigate. Now, I think part of that conclusion that I come to, which is, they had other things in their mind to promote, is that this place, Sanford, did have this history. In fact, this, of not affording people of all races the same justice. This latest chief that was removed from office, unfortunately, for doing his job, Chief Bill Lee, he was brought on because Sanford had that kind of, race problem history going on. And geography is everything and context is everything. They're not wrong to say initially, we want to ask the police questions and we want answers. What they're wrong to do is to say the police are doing nothing because they have a reckless disregard for black people's lives, and to the media to blame the Stand Your Ground law, when the Stand Your Ground law is not the direction that the defense is going in. The defense is going in the direction, this is just self-defense. The Stand Your Ground has this implication of retreat in it. And when someone's sitting on your chest, smashing your head repeatedly into the pavement after breaking your nose, you're not really in the position where you can just retreat or take another door or go into another room. You're in a position where you have to defend yourself from further threat of imminent bodily harm, and that's the position that George was in. Now,
Stand Your Ground comes into play well after charges are filed. It's a argument before a judge to get charges dismissed.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and until there are those charges filed, you'd never have even the opportunity to argue, or use that statute to defend yourself and say, I want to avail myself of the hearing that this law affords me. Until you're actually
the Stand Your Ground was really a straw man in George's case.
Stand Your Ground had nothing to do with George. Stand Your Ground was this leftist agenda. It was the means by which they were saying, so we have to do something about these awful, awful laws. Now, other states have these laws on the book. They didn't have problems with this law. Florida has this law on the book. Up until George, they didn't have problems with this law. They started to have a problem with it when he was a white racist who gunned down a black child. And once you make that the narrative and you say this is exactly what happened here and it happened because of this law, you make that law the enemy, and then you make the people who are actually enforcing the law the enemy, and it helps the people who are questioning them call their credibility by extension into question. But in reality, the only thing that happened was George gave exactly the truth of what happened to the authorities, willingly, didn't run from the crime scene or alleged crime scene, didn't hide his gun, didn't flee and leave them on a manhunt, didn't hide in some ditch somewhere, went with the cops, said, I shot this person, it was self-defense, here's what was going on, this is what was happening. When he said, you got to shoot him, because in any situation where you're a person who's armed and someone threatens to disarm you who's already escalated force exponentially before they make that threat and then they move to disarm you, you have to take that threat seriously, because if you're wrong about that person's intentions, you could in fact be dead wrong.
All right, Deirdre, we have a lot more callers here.
Super.
For questions for Robert Zimmerman Jr. All right, caller, you're up. Go ahead.
It's Lauren, buddy.
All right, hold tight. Caller, you're up next.
Hello?
Yes, you're live with Robert Zimmerman Jr.
Hi, Robert. Just my sympathies for your position your brother's in. But it seems to me that there's a bit of a race politics going on in the US at the moment, and your brother's right in the middle of it. Do you think the charges would be, or the national campaign against your brother, the media campaign, would be in play if if Trayvon was a white man, or if your brother was, this is purely hypotheticals, but if your brother was a black man, or if they were exactly the same race, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, clearly, it's my understanding from crime statistics that black men are killed by black men far, far more than they are by white or other men. There's definitely a race angle here because George was not, in fact, a white man, and nobody really bothered to get to the bottom of that question. When the story became about, nothing was done because this person is black, and then on the flip side of the coin, you have the person who shot this person is white and therefore not credible. I think the media needs to take over there, or honest journalists really trying to get to the bottom of the truth and say, is this in fact what happened? First of all, is this in fact true that what these people are saying about this man, that he's white and therefore racist, is that true? Is he even white? The media just abdicated their responsibilities, didn't want to ask those questions, and just wanted to continue the narrative because they get more feedback on Twitter, or they get more likes on Facebook, or they get more, listeners on their station. No offense, Randy, not you, but the media generally.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
That's what happened.
Robert, you know I agree with you. Your next caller, you're up. Your question for Robert. Yeah, you're an idiot. Next question for Robert Zimmerman Jr.
Hello?
Yes, you're online.
Hello?
Hello, Robert Jr.?
Yes, hi.
Yes, I was just wondering, okay, it's so much is going on for the past 8, however many months. But and you're on Twitter now, right? Correct?
Yes, I
Hello?
am.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm on
all
Zimmerman
of the stuff that's going on with the blogs and the media, the only thing that really matters is George got out of his car and are you following him? Yes. That's all that really matters. We all see that George Zimmerman wasn't beat to enter his life. Like, come on now. Like, he didn't even go to the hospital. They didn't even give him a Band-Aid. They didn't even give him a Band-Aid for his head.
Okay, let me just stop you right there and try to address some of these 2 points that you've made about getting out of the car and not truly being injured.
Do you honestly think that Trayvon left the house to go kill somebody? Something happened, okay? Like, he didn't leave the house. He went to go get Skittles and iced tea, right? Skittles and iced tea. He's not going to
let him answer you.
Just kill somebody.
Yeah, we can get it all. We can get into all that later, but you've raised a couple.
Those pictures were photoshopped. Those pictures were photoshopped.
Okay.
That red blood looks like ketchup. They altered those pictures before they released it. It was a grainy black and white picture at first, and when they got it back, they wanted to make it more clearer, but they put blood on it,
Randy, I think she got her question
out. He was really beat.
Yeah, let me try to actually answer your question. Here's what the problem is. When you accuse a picture of being photoshopped, you're accusing the cop who took the picture of not really having taken that picture or photoshopping that picture, the district attorney who released it of photoshopping it, because they have a copy of it. I mean, it's really beneath the dignity of the judicial system to even address a question like that, but it's not a Photoshop picture, and that's an absurd accusation. Now, not truly injured, that's a very interesting thing because it came up on March 29th with Piers Morgan. What Piers Morgan suggested was, from a video released exclusively by ABC, that George was, in fact, in his mind, quote, perfectly okay. And that's what he told me on the air, and I told him, you know what, Piers, to me, his nose looks swollen, and I'm his brother, and it looks swollen to me. And George was, in fact, not okay. Regardless of what you see on that video at this time after he's been treated by paramedics, we knew the reality as his family as to what had happened. What happened the next day was, Torrey went on the air to call Pierce a liar, that Pierce had no business in this case or giving his opinion or interviewing me or anything else because he was British and he simply didn't understand the pain and the plight of black people. And now he had allowed this liar to come on the air and obfuscate, I think is the word that Torrey used, and just perpetuate these lies because Pierce was just insensitive to blacks. Or something like that. That's a summation of an exchange that they had. I've been called a liar a lot along the way about the injuries my brother did or did not sustain. George's family is very clear about the injuries he did or did not sustain. There's some injuries, in fact, that he sustained or evidence of those injuries that hasn't even come out in court yet, which I'm not going to get into tonight. But when I was called a liar about that image, a few days after that, ABC enhanced the image, and now we have much better images of court. And so now the charge becomes, that have come out in court, of the back of his head. We have testimony by paramedics. We have photos of the front of his nose, photos of him at the police station when the only image of George was the one that Pierce Morgan described as him being perfectly okay. Now that we have that better evidence, people just attack the evidence to attack George. But again, you might have a problem with the criminal justice system if you just want to sit about and attack evidence, because evidence, in fact, comes to light in court. And that's how we've been very patient as a family for the right venue for this to come to light, and it has come to light. So I don't really, I can't help people who don't want to look at the evidence objectively and who just want to make accusations of photoshopping. That, to me, that's absurd. There's evidence of his injuries. There's actual doctor's reports. There's things that happen that people may not be aware of yet because they haven't come out in court. So calling me a liar, and by extension George a liar, his family racist, or whatever else that implies in your mind, it doesn't help your case at all. Back to getting out of the car. And Al Sharpton had a lot to do with this, because Al Sharpton went to a Sanford town hall meeting and told the governing body of Sanford, in his remarks, that George Zimmerman was told not to get out of the car and then got out anyway. That's absolutely, patently false. Never happened. There are never the words uttered in any transcript or phone call by anybody at that non-emergency number, "Don't get out of your car." What happened was after George already was out of his car, and remember he's a civilian, he's not trained like people are at dispatch. A trained person at dispatch asked the question, because they run calls like this all the time, "Are you following him?" And George said, "Yes," and they replied, "We don't need you to do that." And George stopped following Trayvon and, in fact, said, "I've lost sight of Trayvon." Now, Trayvon may have had his own plans for an ambush, or Trayvon may have had his own plans for, how he was going to soften up this guy. Maybe Trayvon was among the many, many, many blacks who thought George was white. In fact, if we're to believe some of the things that have come to light, he was on the phone with a young lady who, when I've heard the testimony that's come to light in court, claims that Trayvon described him as a white man. So, for whatever reason, whatever Mr. Martin was planning that night had nothing to do in reality with what we know from evidence has come to light now, which is that George continued to the end of the street, and it's in his reenactment that he did the following day, to get an address. He wanted an address of a house he could use for the last place that he had seen Mr. Martin, and in fact lost sight of Mr. Martin. But when you hear these things from Al Sharpton, when you hear them at a town hall meeting, and when no one rebuts him, either because he's Al Sharpton or because he's black, and if you rebut people who are black or who are activists, you risk being called a racist because you're just insensitive to the plight of blacks, like Pierce Morgan was insensitive to the to the plight of the black man, according to Torrey. And you don't rebut these people. These people are allowed to spread their mythology unchecked. They make these unrebutted assertions for as long as they want on every media outlet that they can, and then people like that last caller believe them.
Well, Robert, I can understand your frustration with this. I know Randy and I deal with individuals on this radio program all the time, and you could, show them fact after fact, and they just don't live in reality, and they like to live in la-la land and believe what they want to believe. And my question to you is, originally your brother, it was pretty much an open and closed case. The officers on the scene said it was self-defense. That was it. Do you feel the only reason your brother was arrested for this, or the feds came after him or what have you, was because of the media attention that this got?
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that. I think that when George was, in different courts in different jurisdictions in different states, and even the Supreme Court, there's some, kind of mixed messages as to what constitutes an arrest. But here's what happened. A person who was attacked, who used their firearm to defend themselves, was taken in police custody, handcuffed to a police station and interrogated about what happened. Right. Some would argue that's clearly an arrest. Some, like, for example, I believe Alan Dershowitz has come out and said, of course he was arrested. I teach criminal law. Clearly he was arrested. When you lose your freedom to move about, when you are taken into custody, you're no longer free to go. To some, that constitutes an arrest. And I don't think that the people calling for the Justice Department to get involved were some of these black activist groups, the National Action Network, the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Congressional Black Caucus was applauding the Justice Department for finally getting involved through their various members. And the people welcoming the scrutiny was the Sanford Police Department, was George, because when you don't have anything to hide and when the truth is simply allowed to be the truth, you can rely on it, and it exonerates you because there's nothing afoot there that's going to contradict reality. Reality is what came out of your lips to the police. I think that it's not always a bad thing when there's a doubt for things like this to happen, because it can actually, in the end, go a long way toward clarifying some of the misconceptions that people have about a given situation. In this case, it was about whether or not George was a racist. And the overwhelming, no witness came forward to the FBI, to my knowledge, to say, yes, he is a racist. In fact, it's overwhelmingly clear to me now that the evidence will show one day completely the opposite, and not just anecdotal evidence that people hear from his family, but evidence that is brought to light in court.
Right. Originally, they were arguing whether he was detained or arrested. I mean, it was so ticky-tack. My question: whatever happened with the petition that was investigating the feds on this case?
There was a petition created organically, kind of by a person who lives in California, and the thing that was clear about that was that they were trying to make a distinction between elected or appointed officials who take an oath of office being investigated for civil rights violations, because they are the ones who are supposed to protect your civil rights, and people who were making the rounds claiming that George had violated Trayvon Martin's civil rights. So George isn't an elected or appointed official who took an oath to protect anybody's civil rights. So the point of that petition, was twofold. One, kind of to make that distinction, and two, to bring to light that there's something here. And it's not to say this person or that person or whoever. It's to say we need to get to the bottom of why this was charged the way that it was. Not to come to conclusions, not to say investigate them because this is reverse racism, because you were politically pressured, because you were this or that or the other. But to say, people like us who peacefully petition the government, not change.org, just want an investigation into this matter. And the White House's parameters right before the election for those petitions being honored or replied to jumped to 25,000. Now, the number of signatures, it didn't make the number of signatures that it needed to
well, I can tell you, to be honest with you, I can tell you, I've seen petitions on there that get well over 25,000 that do not get a response from the White House, and I've seen petitions that get far less than 25,000, and the White House does issue a response to them. So it's completely biased, and they pick and choose what they want to reply to.
Yeah, but the way I see it as a success, the reason I see it as a success is it really pointed out to me by reading all those different states, or the people, from all these different states signing the petition, that there was support all across this country for an individual's rights to due process. There was support all across this country for the Second Amendment, at the very least for an individual's right to protect himself, protect their life, and that should not be criminalized. It also showed me that there were different conversations. When you have a conversation about stand your ground, maybe your state has one, maybe it doesn't. When you have a conversation about guns generally, there's all different mentalities about guns, and they really, really do vary from state to state lines. People in Arizona are having drug cartels shoot bullets into their living room, People in Florida are an older population. They're being sometimes they become the victims of things like home invasions, where people just brazenly enter an occupied home and do whatever they want, murder, rape, steal, kill, because they know that a lot more people who are older and retired live in Florida. People who live in Virginia, an open carry state, don't bat an eye when they see someone walking down the road, as I've walked down my road many times with a shotgun slung over my shoulder. It doesn't cause some kind of, there's no cause for alarm there. If I did the same thing in Florida, the police would be there in a matter of minutes, because this is a mandatory concealment state, and you can only conceal handguns. So you don't have the freedom to walk around with rifles, shotguns, or whatever just slung over your shoulder. And that's what started to make clear to me that in order to make this a really national conversation, to humanize George the right way and to talk to people all across this country, I had to be sensitive to the fact that people bring different ideas about guns to the table, ideas about self-defense to the table. Clearly, some people live in very, very nice, posh communities. I'm not going to name names, but some of the people who interviewed me, they may live behind gates, ironically enough, or in very elaborate towers, buildings, and whatnot with doormen, where they're never going to see any type of trespassing or crime in their day-to-day life that affects them or that has the potential to affect them. Other people don't have that luxury. And, again, that's where geography came into play. And I had to be sensitive, too, to the fact that people who formulated their opinion about this case not only used white and black, but they bring their own experiences to the table. Living in a gated community in Beverly Hills is completely different than living in a gated community in Sanford, Florida.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, and I can tell you, I mean, guns out in California, that's taboo. It's kind of with the debate going on right now with the gun control issue, they're portraying responsible gun owners as being evil, as being irresponsible, as being terrorists, as being just wackos if you own a firearm or if you want to have a means of defending yourself. And, I mean, that's the biggest issue. And I'd like to actually have you weigh in on the current gun control debate and just find out what your thoughts are on it with what's been going on lately.
I think that one of the things that's important about this current debate are the people who want to make Sandy Hook central to the debate, and I think that just that sentiment is an honorable one, because gun owners who are responsible, as well as people who are not gun owners, we don't want to see another carnage happen like what happened in Sandy Hook or has happened. And sometimes we say that and we don't act on our words till the next one happens. I think what's important is to kind of extrapolate what happened at Sandy Hook and other schools and other gun-free zones and call it for what it is. What they are areas that become targets for these madmen because they are gun-free zones. One of the things I know about government puts guns where they see fit. It's just the reality we live in. I'm not endorsing it. I'm not begrudging them for it. Cops carry guns. Air marshals carry guns. Customs and Border Patrol carries guns. They have the right to walk around with guns all that they want. In fact, there are some children who go to school in Washington who are protected by guns. And the reason they're protected by guns is they would stop a crazed gunman from killing them with a bullet. We need to make that an entirely separate debate and conversation than controlling or curtailing the rights of people who lawfully own guns and who are responsible with their guns and don't have any need of the government to control or protect them in terms of what guns they should or should not be allowed to have and why. And by and large, that's the far majority of people. But if we're not careful in separating, apples and oranges here, we let these psychos get control of the dialogue. And we get called for supporting our rights under the Second Amendment as insensitive or ludicrous or, brash, and we just don't care. And, don't you care about the children who died? Of course we care. We all care. So I would ask people like Senator Feinstein, like the president, like other people who want to curtail my rights and your rights, what are you doing to make every school in America as secure as Sasha and Malia's school? Aren't those kids at Sandy Hook just as valuable as those children of the president who are protected by guns? Shouldn't all children be protected to match the threat? And unfortunately, the threat has evolved, and it's something we didn't have to deal with 40, 50 years ago, like we have to deal with in 2013. But the threat has evolved, and the reality is that people prey upon the helpless. There's a lot of evidence of that. They prey upon the helpless. They know where people are going to be, probably in a situation where they're not going to have guns, like Sandy Hook Elementary School, and they prey upon them. There are psychopaths who pick up a gun and fire that gun. It doesn't fire itself on its own. And they hurt people. And I think the only thing that's going to stop them is if you meet force with force. I think that we need to be careful that the leftist radicals that want to equate guns with violence are called out every time they do that. I equate guns with preparedness. I equate accepting the reality of the threat with being a realist. I don't think that I'm violent for suggesting, or that violence is suggested. Where there is a gun, there is violence. There is just violence as it is in this world. And that's what attacked those children in Sandy Hook, and that's what attacked those people at Virginia Tech, and that's what attacked those people at Columbine. And there also needs to be, in schools, much more study as to how, why doesn't this happen at places, at other places? Because there's more intelligence, there's more counseling, there's more looking into the background of kids, there's more funding for mental health. Fund mental health, but here's where you start. You start in the schools. You start preventing people who grow up to be 20-some years old or whatever and just being gone off the radar screen, that nobody's ever heard their name until they've massacred children. Find that out, that child has serious issues when they're 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 15 years old, and give access to mental health to children. Because when you do that, you may actually be preventing proactively, just like you prevent other diseases by being concerned with the diets of children, for example. You may actually prevent a tragedy down the road from someone who got access to help, or at least identified as dangerous when the time was more appropriate, which is when they're in the care of the school system and the funding and the resources are there.
Right. No, I mean, listen, the state-run media, everyone on the left, you hear them pushing this, trying to disarm the public, and at the same time they're saying turn in your guns, yet they're saying that we're not infringing on your Second Amendment right to bear arms. And you're 100% right.
It's always the people who are protected by guns who are saying turn in your guns, like Rahm Emanuel.
They can send their kids to private schools that have armed guards, yet we can't do. Obviously, our kids aren't good enough, or then it's too dangerous. Because what are you going to do? Have security guards shooting over the heads of children? Dianne Feinstein, of course, I can't have a firearm to protect myself, yet she has a permit to carry concealed weapon. Heck, her own security detail has full automatic weapons. For God's sake. So again, it's a hypocrisy, and I think we can all we've had this discussion here now for going on for about a week regarding gun control, and all the numbers. I mean, you can look at it until you're blue in the face. Where there's more guns, there's less crime. Simple as that. Gun-free zones, that's where these psychos go to commit these heinous acts. And I think the bigger question is, we know this, yet you have the president who assigns a task force that Joe Biden heads up and pulls in Rahm Emanuel from Chicago, where he can't curb violence. Okay, there's a gang-on-gang violence going on left and right, and they have the strictest gun control laws there. The question is, why don't they want to let people defend themselves? What agenda do they have to disarm the American public?
Historically, the agenda for disarming any public has been tyranny and oppression. That's just what's happened. That's just what history teaches us. Now, I can't get into Joe Biden's mind or Barack Obama's mind or Senator Feinstein's mind. I can just, examine their words, but I can also examine the words of Adolf Hitler, who says that the first thing you do when you're trying to suppress a people is to disarm them. And I can also get into the words of George Washington, our first president, very familiar with guns, and who says that the people have to have, firepower, in essence, that matches the government's. And we get there into, is confiscation the real agenda? What does the Second Amendment really say? What the Second Amendment tells us is that, and some of the critics say, well, they didn't have these semi-automatic weapons back when it was drafted. That's not what the point is. The point
is, they didn't specifically say muskets in there either. I think it's pretty clear what they've said. The Supreme Court ruled on what they meant by militia and all this other good stuff that the left always brings up. So I mean that's been tried and tested throughout time already, and it's an old argument. And you're right, as far as the 1938 Nazi Germany gun control laws. Our laws that LBJ signed into legislation here in 1968 were copied word for word from Nazi Germany. And, history has a tendency to repeat itself, yet so many people I think they're uneducated. They believe the propaganda that is spewed on the state-run media, and they don't ask questions. And you see the same thing going on with your brother, and how people already in their minds, he's guilty. He just decided he's a racist. He was a racist guy who decided to go out and kill this guy and hunt him in cold blood without listening or looking into the facts. People just don't care about facts anymore, it seems.
Right. And I think along with that comes dependency. You know, there's a fundamental disagreement I'm noticing between people who firmly believe in the right to bear arms and all the rights of the Constitution and believe that our government should be more in line with how it was originally intended, and people who don't. And the people who don't are by far, in my opinion, far more dependent on government and want government to make many more of their decisions for them than someone, for example, like myself or yourself. I want to be able to arm myself the way I see fit to defend what my needs are. What my needs are, where there were throngs of people, is that there were throngs of people passing around flyers and posters to come kill my brother. Those are my needs, and the government stood by and was silent. So that's one of the ways that tyranny raises its head is, if you don't agree with us or support us or are complicit with our decrees, you will be eliminated. Now, it may be the new Black Panther Party who's eliminating us, or the throngs of people, you know, who would have done us harm if they would have known where we were, if they would have found us. But the Constitution speaks, the Second Amendment speaks to being able to have firepower commensurate to that of the government, to match the government's power, so that you are not able to be overtaken by tyranny. And
right, and then you have the left. I mean, you know, I heard even Piers Morgan says this. They always go to the extreme and say, "Oh, does that mean you should be able to own nuclear weapons?" I mean, it's you know, you sit there and you scratch, you know, really. I mean, look at what happened when the Soviets, you know, went into Afghanistan. They fought them. You know, the Afghans fought them pretty well, and the Soviets had, you know, when they fought them with AKs, for God's sakes. And they couldn't defeat the Afghans. So, you know, the arguments that always come out of the left.
You were talking about schools, and here's the reality of guns. Guns are a deterrent. The left also says, you know, how is a guard or two guards or, you know, random teachers or whatever, how are they going to stop the madman that will come with an assault rifle? Well, the madman is going to have to think that the reality is that they're going to be deterred from doing what they came to do because there's going to be a bullet between their eyes. So guns are a deterrent to tyranny. It doesn't just mean that all hell has to break loose and then we start arming ourselves and then we don't turn over our weapons. It's the people's check on the power of the government, and that's why it was written into our Constitution.
You know what? We guard our federal buildings with guns. We guard our president and elected officials with guns. We guard our banks, our money with guns. There's no reason why we shouldn't have armed guards and guns to protect our children. When there's a bad guy with a gun, people call the police. Why? They want a good guy with a gun to neutralize the situation.
And they want him to get there really, really, really quick, or it's going to be too late. And the quickest way to be a good guy with a gun is to arm yourself.
Of course. I mean, listen, everyone knows that you can't have a society that says, okay, you have no firearms, you have to just call 911 if there's an emergency. But you know what? The cops will show up and the individual will be dead. That's what will happen. And you'll have crime rates going through the roof. Wherever, if you look at it, the states that have the strictest gun control have the highest gun-related crime.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Gun-related crime and violent crime, because what happens when you take guns out of the equation is people start using knives, people start using other weapons to hurt people because there is no more deterrent. There is not a lethal deterrent. So, you know, Piers Morgan likes to compare his country, which is minuscule in comparison to the vastness of our country.
Well, it's not even working in the UK. They have the highest violent crime rate in the EU. Hell, it's more dangerous there than South Africa.
Right. So people like him make the argument, well, at least this many X number of people didn't die at the hands of a gun. Well, are those really gun murders, number one? Number two, what about your violent crime rate? You know, and you cite Japan or you cite whatever, there could be a lot of people in Japan getting their throats slit. You know, I wouldn't know. I don't live in Japan, but I know that where there's not a lethal deterrent, it makes people who don't care about the law, who disregard the law generally in any way, more emboldened to carry out whatever crime it is that they had in mind. People who are criminals and who will do wrong will use a boxcar like Timothy McVeigh. You could take every gun tomorrow, poof, the guns are all gone. Crime will still happen. In fact, I would suggest that crime would skyrocket because there's no more deterrence. There's no deterrent there. Tell all those cops to turn in their guns because we're all just going to stop using them from now on. The cops aren't going to believe you. They're not going to go turn in their guns just because some ban was passed. They're going to keep them. So are those elected officials who are surrounded by people with guns 24 hours a day. And they want to keep it that way because they're safe, starting with a deterrent, and then if push comes to shove, they have the power to match the threat.
Of course, and you don't hear, you don't hear these individuals coming out complaining about all the drone attacks and the hundreds, if not thousands, of kids that are killed all over the world from drone attacks. You don't hear about we've had God knows how many kids died since Sandy Hook from handguns and gang-related incidents. You don't hear them going out there and screaming. It's not the guns. It's not the knives. It's not the means in which someone like Timothy McVeigh uses fertilizer. They didn't outlaw fertilizer. It's not the means in which they carried out the attack. It's the individual. This is a mental health issue. It's not a gun issue, and I think we both can agree on that.
Absolutely, and here's another thing that I'd remind people who use, comparisons like Pierce Morgan did with my buddy Ben Shapiro and pull out Sudafed after referring to our Constitution as our little book. Sudafed is not protected by the Second Amendment. The right of the people to bear arms is. So you can make all these silly arguments about Sudafed or box trucks or why don't we ban cars because they kill people too. I really don't think it helps either side. I think we need to remain laser beam focused on the Constitution, on the words on that page that really, 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 really intelligent men wrote a long time ago. And their words have served us well throughout history. The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed, not the right of the people to buy Sudafed. And there's a very good reason for that, and we can get into that. And people who, I brought up before, Pierce keeps asking for some kind of reason that a civilian needs AR-15s. Right. Maybe you, Pierce, in your high-rise in New York, you probably don't need one because when you leave your building and get in your driver's car and get driven to work, and you're in an environment that people with guns are securing you, you don't understand the need that maybe perhaps someone who lives in Arizona who's having drug cartels, across the street, across the border, fire at their homes or at their environments, they might really need the sense of security that an AR-15 brings them, or someone perhaps in my family. If throngs of people were to come to our driveway to threaten us or with clear intent to kill us or at least to look for my brother to kill him, I might feel a little bit better if I have an AR-15, and that's my constitutional right to have one.
Again, anyone who has an open mind on this issue, I think it's very clear that more guns equals less crime, and it's better to have the gun than not have the gun. If you have a non-biased approach to this and you don't have an agenda, that's the conclusion that you would come to. In my mind, I don't see how you can see it any other way.
Right, and it's important that we stand up to people who use the argument that guns equals violence. You just said more guns equals less crime because you're including all forms of crime in that, the crime that they want to conveniently ignore because guns are a deterrent. But some people make the mistake of being allowed to get away or letting these people get away with equating guns with violence. Guns are preparedness. The founding fathers came. America's always criticized we're a really young country. We don't have our act together yet. We don't know what we're doing. Look overseas in Europe. Americans originally fled Europe. They fled that way of life, and these very, very smart people who had to go through some very violent upheavals in their lifetimes to secure our republic were very keenly aware of two things, tyranny and what the real definition of violence is. Guns aren't violence. Guns are preparedness. Tyranny is what they fled. And the reason they fled it was when you disarm people, the end objective of tyranny is elimination of people who do not, it's elimination, and make no mistake about it. It's not reprogramming or, just read this flyer and you'll understand. It was, if you don't look like this, or in Hitler's situation, or if you don't agree with me exclusively, to this day, which still happens in China, you will be eliminated. It happens in Iran, it happens in North Korea, it happens in China, it happens in third world countries across the globe. It's elimination. So not only is your freedom curtailed, your very life could be curtailed, and then you don't have guns and you find out it's too late.
Yeah, I'm just sick of these politicians sitting there and doing nothing. They have a knee-jerk reaction, so it looks good in the public's eye. We already had an assault rifle ban in the 90s. Columbine happened while we had the assault rifle ban. It did nothing to drive down the violent crime rate or gun-related incidences. And if anything, actually, since 2004, since the assault rifle ban actually expired, gun-related violence has declined. And they're talking about assault rifles, and assault rifles are used in such a small percentage of gun-related violence in this country. So they're so off topic. And let me tie this back, or bring it back to your brother and the case that's going on. First of all, I have to ask, in light of what your brother went through, do you carry a concealed weapon, you yourself?
Our security we take seriously, and there's seen and unseen as well as disclosed and undisclosed details about our security. And I would never disclose a detail like that because it would get me in a situation either where I'm provoked to use it or someone thinks I don't have one or I do have one and they take a certain action one way or another.
Fair enough. And where are you guys at right now with the case? What's going on with your brother?
Well, there's going to be a hearing February 5th. It's a docket sounding that was postponed from January 8th. And Mark O'Mara, his attorney, generally publishes, a few days ahead of time, what the agenda will be at that particular hearing. And I don't get ahead of him. I don't say this is what's going to happen or not going to happen because he's the attorney. And sometimes, like we found out on January 8th, there's a hearing on the schedule, and then it's not. So I don't want to raise expectations or lower them based on anything that I say. He does his job very well, and when he publishes what's on the docket or what's going to be heard, then I'll let that be the way that comes to light. Eventually, though, in a broader context, there will be at the end of April, presumably at the end of April, the way things are going now, a self-defense immunity hearing, and this is what some people mistakenly refer to as a stand your ground hearing. That law. The law known as the Stand Your Ground Law, what it does is it gives defendants an opportunity that they can take. They can go before a judge and tell the judge, I defended myself, and make a case affirmatively for why they had to defend themselves. Now, what this law also does in that self-defense immunity hearing is if the judge agrees with you based upon a preponderance of the evidence, that's the legal standard that they use, they can absolve you not just criminally, but by dismissing the charges, absolve you of any civil liability. And that it would be great if in April this was behind us legally, and we'll see what happens if in April. If not, June 10th, there's a trial scheduled on the calendar that will presumably happen June 10th if nothing else changes. And so if there's no resolution in April, we'll look forward to the trial in June.
Okay, and where can for all of our listeners, if they wanted to follow you personally or keep up on the case, or that you have a Twitter you want to give out, or a website, or any information you want to hand out to people?
Yes, two actually. One site that I encourage people to go to all the time because it has all of the latest updates on the case is gzlegalcase.com. It's really kind of an unprecedented step that Mark took to make evidence available on the Internet. It's not something that happens a lot in criminal trials, but it's 2013, and the way you defend your client has evolved. The other is R. Zimmerman Jr., RZIMMERMAN JR, not Junior spelled out, and that's my personal Twitter handle. That I tweet about things that I tweeted about this appearance tonight, I tweet about current events, about things happening in gun policy, about Second Amendment interpretations, or, tomorrow when the new recommendations to the president are disclosed, I'll be busy on there commenting about that as well.
Yeah, don't get me going on those unconstitutional executive orders that may be coming down the pike.
We'll see. We'll see how constitutional they are, and we'll see. Clearly, the chief executive has one tool they can avail themselves of right away without ruffling any feathers is much, much stricter enforcement of the laws that are already on the books. I don't think people are against that as much as they would be of trying to be creative with your authority. If the laws are on the books, enforce them. That if that's within your executive power and that's what you intend to do, go for it.
I think, no, I have no problem with that. I think most people, if he tries pursuing an assault rifle ban, which I don't think he would do through executive order, he recommended to Congress, but if he tries limiting, 30-round magazines and starts going, the route that Cuomo did today, I don't know if you saw what passed in New York, which was just completely ridiculous. They were, they were actually debating, they were considering gun confiscation in New York. It was actually on the table to confiscate all firearms.
Right. Yeah, I do. I have these. I have different articles, here in front of me. But talk of confiscation, talk of bans. It's like I said before. We need to make apples and oranges oranges.
Agreed.
Don't use what happened with George, as the reason we need to repeal the stand your ground law in the state of Florida. Don't use what happened at Sandy Hook as the reason that somebody else needs to have their rights curtailed. If you're concerned about the plight of African Americans at the hand of this police department that has some history purportedly of not being equal in the way they administer justice, demand that police department be held accountable. If you have a problem with children not having the right to go to school without the threat of being gunned down, fix that problem. But don't come after my rights and my liberties. Because
they highlight
a tragedy happened.
Well, they highlight your brother's case, but there are plenty of instances where the stand your ground law has worked perfectly fine. There's a reason why that law is there. Okay? It saved your brother's life, it sounds like. Thank God he had a firearm.
Well, I don't know that I agree necessarily with that it saves his life. What I think that it will save, all of us, the taxpayers of my family, and people who really want some kind of resolution in this case is, it may save this case from dragging on and on and on forever because by virtue of this law, and because things like this happen, you have that opportunity to make your case before a judge. So, certainly in George's mind, he didn't say, well, here's what the Stand Your Ground statute says because I memorized it, and here's now the story I need to make up. It just so happens that this is what fit the bill, as it were. Now that we're where we are, that there were criminal charges brought forth, there is this opportunity that he has under that statute to exonerate himself before being before a jury.
Wow. All right, well,
and you're right, It has worked. Different states, approximately half of the states in the union have them, and that one law is evidence of if half of the states in the union have them, and they're not all the same, that just goes to show how differently people in different states, how they feel about guns, how gun culture varies from state to state, and you're really having 50 different conversations at once when you even just say the word gun, because it means one thing to people in Alaska and a whole other things to people in Maine.
Right, and also it doesn't help when you have the state-run media. They'll cover these mass shootings or certain instances where it paints a picture where firearms are bad, but they tend to neglect and ignore the countless number of times firearms are used in self-defense and in a positive light, and they completely ignore that and just throw it under the rug.
Right, exactly. You don't hear about it. They don't want you to hear about it.
No, exactly, because it does not line up with their agenda, and unfortunately it seems that the state-run media has become propaganda, entertainment, as well as, I would say a means for the different political parties and a political outlet for them, and they're just out there to preach their message. But, if I'm gonna be quiet, let Randy take over here and see if there are any other callers I want to get on here, but I do want to thank you for joining us, and please make sure to come back and keep us up to date with what's going on with your brother, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks, Lauren. It was great talking to you. Appreciate it.
You too, buddy.
Robert?
Yes, hi.
Hi, this is Deirdre.
Hi, Deirdre.
Hi. I wasn't sure if you could hear me or not. I don't know if we're hot or live.
We're live.
Oh, great. I really respect your commitment to the facts, and especially in a case that is completely run by emotion and the lack of facts. But I have to ask you an emotional question.
Sure.
There's that point 1 month after the incident. You're in the middle of a tsunami of attacks from the media, from your community, from national organizations, and President Barack Obama goes on television and compares Trayvon Martin to the son that he does not have. What was that like for your family?
Well, it just goes to show you either have to believe that even the president was fooled, misled, ill-informed, or very, very calculated by some of the remarks that preceded that, such as that the president would be ready to answer a question if he were asked that. Now, kind of cueing the media, go ahead and ask the president about Trayvon Martin. Now, how does it make you feel as a family? Bullied, in a word. At first, I think the president was on the right track, and it sounded to me from what he started to say that he was going to remind the American people that this is America, this isn't Iran, and we don't just, or this is not, pitchfork and torch America. We have laws. We have to respect an investigation and respect its answers and give the police the time and resources they need to do that fairly and thoroughly. And I thought that was the direction he was going to go. Then he brought up his skin color. And so seemingly it appeared that the reason we had to do soul searching was because the person who was killed would have looked like his unborn son or his theoretical son.
Yes.
We need to do soul searching about why anybody is dead, who's no matter what age they are, because every life is precious. But
of course.
I think, personally, I was definitely let down by those comments because I don't think he knows that people who hear that, he knows he's the president, obviously, but people who hear those remarks...
Well, he keeps reminding us, so I'm not sure.
Well, they may already have fiction in their minds. In fact,
exactly.
Most people did. They already had fiction in their minds, and so here's this great reinforcer of the narrative and this great endorser of their fiction as truth, of their mythology as fact. And that's all some people need to hear. The president's words are very, very powerful when anybody hears them. And I had no problem with the eulogization or eulogy style thing he was doing at the beginning, and I really did think it was going to go in a different direction. But I had to wonder naturally, would an American president who were white be able to get away with same or similar comments? Would a white president be able to stand there from the Rose Garden and say, if I had a son, he would be white? Or you need to examine your souls, do some soul searching because the decedent is of my skin color. If you use the standard that the media applied to George, that they evolved into calling him a white Hispanic, when it was clear he was Hispanic and not in fact white, then doesn't that make our president a white black? Do we really need to get it? Do we need to have that discussion or make those distinctions? We've come so far from that place.
And I have to say that if a white president had have come out and sided with your brother simply because of a skin color issue or a heritage issue, I think that people would have gone nuts.
We'll never know. We can theorize. I think it would have been tremendously insensitive of any person to make comments like that just based on theoretical people who don't exist. Who really did exist were two people. One person died, one person survived. And we need to keep it about that and about facts, and that's what the American people need to hear from their president. They don't need to hear references about skin color, in my opinion.
I agree with you, and I think, this story was packaged and sold and pretty much gift-wrapped as, murder being Trayvon Martin and murderer being your brother George Zimmerman. and
right.
it was black and white, and you can't. There were no subtleties in the narrative, in the story, which initially made me very suspicious because things are much more complicated in reality.
And we have to actually get the real answers, or justice is not served. And things are much more. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because in reality, what happened was somebody defended themselves. Now,
exactly,
it's the job of and that's very cut and dry. And it's the job of the police to actually get to the bottom of what happened and be convinced that in fact that's what happened. And then you have the media and everybody else who wants you to believe that it's really just so complicated and the police are doing nothing. And there's so many questions here about guns and so many questions about, the plight of African Americans that George is insensitive to, and others like him. And it's really not that complicated. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. What happened that night was that someone was interrogated and said this is what happened, and that's in fact what happened. Now, people who were looking for all these other reasons or all these other explanations for what happened started to draw those racial lines and say, well, that can't possibly be what happened, because remember, this is a white man. So the fact that a black person is now dead, there's the proof. What more proof do we need? It can't possibly be that we just take him at his word. Well, what happened to evidence? What happened to investigations? What happened, in fact, that none of the evidence, as the police chief went out and said, and other officials in Sanford, none of the evidence contradicted what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, in my opinion, it still hasn't. But when you ask questions and come to conclusions based on race, sure, you're a group kind of ganging up on one person and bullying them. I think it would have been more presidential, and I think it was a moment, kind of that the president missed out on, to be supremely post-racial and say and remind us all, no matter what color you are, no matter what philosophy you bring to the table, when you think about this is America. We're going to get to the bottom of this. The authorities are investigating, will continue to investigate, and we need to be very sensitive how we talk about this, because we're all brothers and sisters in the end. I think that would have been far more resonating with more people. And I think,
and productive.
I have to question and productive, and I have to question the timing too, because this is as he's kicking off his presidential campaign. He goes out and makes these comments about his theoretical son's skin color.
Well, and the day afterwards was when the audio clip that was played happened. The new Black Panthers descend on, a medium-sized Florida town, and
right.
start talking about hunting, citizens, a single citizen for something, being judge and jury, and no one stands up, no one takes a moment. I mean, a couple of the callers have given Trayvon Martin the benefit of every doubt, and that's fine.
Right.
But you have to extend that also to your brother. And if you say that Trayvon Martin didn't go out to beat up someone or kill somebody, you have to say that George Zimmerman wasn't driving to the store and was going to stop by to shoot a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it rings. It would almost be laughably ludicrous to think something like that could actually be reality. When you look back on some of the reenactments and how wrong they were, I don't think wrong even accurately describes them. Just how ludicrous they were. I mean, they're really just portraying someone just walking up to someone and shooting them. But unfortunately, people still have the perception of the news as reporters of fact, and they need to really realign themselves with reality as for the future when they investigate other things, especially when there's a question of race or racial motivations. People made up this notion that he had said the word coon or coons, or that word, that I haven't heard in my lifetime anybody use for anything, and I don't know if George has or not, but I heard it in literature in high school, and that was about it. But that's
I believe it might be in Huckleberry Finn.
I think that's where I heard it, yeah. And, the teacher has to kind of explain, once upon a time this was a very bad thing. It's like the N-word today, and once upon a time, this was what people used way back in the day to insult people who were black, But I haven't heard it ever used. I have never been in a room setting, anything, where someone has used that word to describe a person of any race. And I would seriously doubt that George had either. But, much ado was done about that. To convict him. And so, again, you kind of find a relatively simple situation, which was self-defense. All the police are saying it's self-defense, but when that's not enough, well, let's just go with he said coons. And
let's make it clear for the listeners that he was saying it was cold.
I think George said on Hannity that he said punks, that when he heard
punks.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the media was kind of going back and forth of, well, did he say cold or did he say coons? Or he could have said goons, or he could, and cold was one of them that people who were supporting him were saying, no, I hear cold. But I think when George did his interview on Hannity, he said at the station when they played it for him, that was very clear, or when he heard it by the authorities, that it was punks. That's right.
And the truth is that there were multiple break-ins, that the neighborhood that your brother lives in was not, an earthly paradise, and there was a reason that the neighborhood watch was there.
There was a reason that in a community of roughly 200 homes that were occupied, that was, pegged as gated and therefore secure. There's a reason that the police were called in 13 months, 400 times to that community. If you don't live in a community where every home calls the police, 2 times a year or more, you're not going to understand the dynamics of really what's going on here, or why it would be, people who live there don't just walk about looking at houses. They don't do that because they're afraid to do that. They just want to get back in their homes, and I don't think that people felt so overwhelmingly safe there that's why they started a neighborhood watch. People that live in communities like that tend not to just stand about in other people's yards or walk around loitering looking into other people's homes. If that's what happened, and that'll be made clear in court. But nonetheless, people that live in communities like that don't tend to do that. Now, when you hear what's going on and you see angelic, child pictures of a very attractive young man who you hear he's gunned down, and you don't come from a community like that, you don't have that context to what, and the media doesn't report that context, you can very easily be misled and then be as passionate as those people who were demonstrating were about what they perceive was in fact the truth. The difference is now we know better. There actually is evidence that's come to light, and it has to be our responsibility, because race was involved here, to come to the truth, not just to accept what we're spoon-fed as truth by the media or by anybody.
Well, and you're right.
Sure, I just want to jump in here. It's Lauren.
Sure.
I don't mind. I think it seems Randy's having a few problems. I apologize for that, and we'll try and keep this going. George, are you? Excuse me, Robert. Are you going to stay with us throughout the hour? We have 47 minutes left on the show. Are you going to be with us for the remaining 47 minutes?
I have to wrap it up. I would say I can stay on for another segment, and I think that I'm being tweeted that there's a caller or callers waiting. I'm not sure if that's accurate.
I want to get to a couple callers, if you don't mind. If you'd like to take a few calls,
sure.
And we'll just kind of go through here and skip the break. So let me get some people on the line, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, 3, 2, 1. You are live. What do you have to say?
Hello, Robert.
Hi.
Good here. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, thanks.
It's a pleasure to speak with you. I want to say one thing, or a few things. First, I think that it's very admirable what you're doing to support your brother. You must have come from a very loving family, And there's a lot of people in America that believe very strongly in George's innocence, and we really appreciate the fact that you're so outspoken on his behalf. And I think you really should give yourself a pat on the back and give him a big hug, because I know he needs it. And we don't want you to ever give up. And we hope deeply and strongly that once George is completely exonerated, he doesn't stop there, that he pursues some of the things that are going on, like the NBC suit, and hopefully I'd like to see more, because frankly he has been slandered and libeled and just completely destroyed in the press, and it's reprehensible what happened to him.
Right. George can't speak for himself right now. He's in kind of a pickle, and I don't speak for his defense. I don't speak for him, because to presume to do so would be to say I was there and this is what happened. George has his own voice, and he'll have the time to use his own voice publicly, which will be defending himself in his hearing. But what you can gather, and the people listening now can gather, and people who've supported us, George is my younger brother, so there's definitely an insight into our values that we have as a family collectively. And one of those values, and the reason I fight, and the reason that I don't stop, is because what happened to George can happen to anybody. Maybe this is my way of changing that lady's tire on the road, or this is my own neighborhood watch, so to speak. What happened to George was and I won't mince words, in my opinion, it was definitely a persecution. It was not a legitimate prosecution. And other people far more learned than I, some of them who are professors at Harvard, would tend to agree with me. Now, I'm his brother. I'm biased. That'll always be a criticism. But I know my brother. I know he told his family the truth. And I'm not going to stand by and continue accepting the norm that in this America, in our America, your race, no matter what your race is a reason to automatically impeach your credibility. In this case, it was that George was white. In the next case, it may be that whoever is black, brown, whatever color, we have to get past that as a country, and it's just not. It wouldn't be fair of me, knowing what I know, to just stand by and do nothing, because there will be a next George Zimmerman if I do that.
Yeah, you know what, Robert? Absolutely. And I'm going to weigh back in here. I had to take care of my daughter Stephanie, and all those callers and all those people in the chat room saying that I'll wait out. Guess what? I'm here, and I've been listening the whole time. So.
Oh, good. Well, there's a caller, apparently 585, who's been trying to call. I don't know if that helps you out any, but
yeah. Well,
we are 585 area.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Robert? We'll just kind of go through them and we'll X them out. Let's see. All right, caller, you're on.
Yes, I'm asking Robert why did he allude to the fact that Trayvon punched his brother when there's no DNA evidence to back that up?
Yeah, well, you know what? Excuse me, Robert. Let me speak for him. There is evidence to back that up.
No, there's not.
Okay?
There's no DNA evidence tying Trayvon to actually hitting George at any time. No blood evidence whatsoever.
You know what?
You're lying. How about you read the evidence?
No, I'm not.
Instead
no, I'm
of
not.
talking
You look
about
at,
what
no,
you
I'm
don't know
not.
about.
You look at the slideshow. No.
There is no evidence.
Goodbye.
Well, here. Let me jump in and say, none of us here are DNA experts. What we do know from the evidence that's been released is there's evidence of some kind of exchange. Obviously, George and Trayvon were at the same place at the same time, and the DNA evidence, in my opinion, not as an expert, but the DNA evidence doesn't dispute that. I can't say or come to conclusions about what may or may not have happened because of this stain was found here and Trayvon is a contributor, that stain's found there and George is a contributor. The right place for that to happen is court. But if you come to your conclusion that you came to, that Trayvon never attacked or it wouldn't help me out either to say George was attacked and DNA proves it. Proof becomes proof when it's interpreted by a court, when it's found to be first discovered, then admissible, and then relied upon as evidence. What we know of that's evidence so far that is most likely going to be admissible, that would be in any criminal trial, is there was some kind of an encounter. And I would just discourage anybody on either side jumping to conclusions about what those disparate pieces or facts of DNA definitely, absolutely, positively mean, because the fact is we're not DNA experts and we're not really qualified to pick it apart that way to satisfy a conclusion.
No, and you know, Robert, what I wanted to do tonight, my point of view, having you on the show with Lauren and Deidre was, and with myself, was to give you a voice to speak. I said that to you. I said the floor is yours.
Right.
I don't think you've had a open floor to speak. I mean, you've been on these little 30-second spots here and there and what have you. But just let you talk about your family and what you've been through and your brother is important, you know?
Yeah, you know what? Here's what I can say about my family. We're a small family. We're not a huge family, but we have our very deeply seated convictions, and we're a very strong family. And we have a tremendous amount of support from, as evidenced by one of your callers that just called. We found that people who support George, ourselves, they're really not just supporting, and they're all colors, by the way, of all backgrounds, nationalities, creeds, from all over the country. People who support us are supporting us because they have either a problem with the media and the way it jumps to and pushes conclusions or agendas, or they have a problem with people's rights being violated, and they don't want to see self-defense criminalized. You know, an act of self-defense, the only person in our family who's going to have to live with taking someone's life in order to prevent their lives from being taken is George. So he has a different burden to carry. He's the one who actually went to jail. You know, we didn't go to jail. We are imprisoned by our circumstance, but we were not, our freedom wasn't taken from us, and we were not taken into custody. We didn't have to make the choice that nobody wants to make, which is, do I fire my gun or am I going to be dead wrong here in about 1 second? He did. So what I would encourage people, you know, what I would like to say is that here we are now, here we find ourselves today. The resolution in this situation will come in the courts. Hate speech, calling people by names, using any, you know, derogatory language whatsoever, really reveals little about what happened that night, but more reveals about what deep-seated resentment or hatred lies within your soul. And that goes for either side or either way of thinking. I think that as Americans, moving toward a post-racial existence for our culture and for our society, because that's the reality of our existence in our lives, and that's where we're headed as a society. What I hope we all learn from this case is to rely on fact, not to not believe in justice automatically, because we don't have the answers to the questions we want when we want them, and not to use some kind of not to use somebody's race or implications about their race to either amplify or amplify or impeach their credibility if those reasons are not forthcoming right away. We are a post-racial country. We have a criminal justice system. We can't get anywhere when we run around saying that, you know, police are doing nothing. It really doesn't help. It doesn't help the police do their job because they have to focus on protests and rallies and everything else, and it doesn't help the judicial process. I would remind Americans that it's a great time to be an American. We do have prosperity in this country. We have choices about what we're going to do with our prosperity moving forward. We have a case here in a situation that the whole world is watching. I hope that at the end of the day, the world gets to see. I hope that the world observes America is still the country where rule of law trumps all individual agendas, where rule of law reigns.
All right, Robert. Let's try before the top of the hour. Let's try to get some callers on here.
I think Robert's words were so inspirational there that everybody's just speechless.
Yeah.
Robert, that's what I think it was, buddy.
Yeah. 5914670. You're up.
Hey, Robert, I spoke to you a couple minutes ago. There was one question I wanted to ask you. I've reviewed a lot of the evidence in the case, quite a great deal of it. And frankly, I see, so much that just shows this whole case is just a total persecution. I mean, and just now the prosecutors are releasing more things slowly through disclosure. Is there anything that you see, that condemns George? I can't see it for the life of me.
No, I think there's not anything I see in evidence, and that I think speaks to the credibility of George and to his family, because from the very beginning we had to rely on George's word, and I did, and so did my family, without having access to any kind of evidence or official information from the police or state attorney's office or anything like that. We know who our brother is. He told us the truth. And we know that all of us are imperfect as humans, but one thing we all know about us as a family, about our value, is you don't lie. You just don't lie, period. It's never right in any situation or circumstance to tell a lie. And George doesn't lie to his family, and I don't lie to mine. So I know that when George is telling us this is what happened, he's telling us the truth. And so naturally I scrutinize, and not just from my perspective, I scrutinize things that come out. I was in LA and I was asked about, no DNA was found on the gun, and that's not our problem, that people concocted in the media that there should be DNA on the gun, or that there was a struggle for the gun, or whatever. George told us what happened. It didn't involve him and Mr. Martin struggling for the gun, and it wasn't an accidental discharge. It involved Mr. Martin threatening to take his gun and George getting control of his weapon and firing. And I think a lot of things that people theorize fly in the face of facts, and then they just don't want to talk about it anymore. And that's just one tiny little example. George told us exactly how he was injured. Members of my family who lived in Florida saw him with his injuries and other injuries which are not yet disclosed. And we're called liars. Or we are told, the next day after I went on Pierce Morgan, Natalie Jackson goes on the air to say that, I don't have the right to destroy Trayvon Martin's memory in the process of defending my loved one, George. And we're called liars, and then the evidence comes to light that, in fact, what we're saying is and was and always will be the truth. And then people don't want to talk about it anymore. Or Attorney Crump or others in that entourage who say there's 2 shots fired, clearly 2 shots. I think Natalie Jackson was the one that said or added, and then you hear a child begging for his life and then another shot, Well, then when it comes out that there was just 1 shot, they don't want to talk about it anymore. And hand in hand with that is the media doesn't want to now go and impeach their credibility and say, what the heck have you been saying about this guy? What are you guys doing? This is lunacy. People hold attorneys in a higher and in a different regard, and when you hear attorneys present something publicly, they're licensed, and presumably they're licensed professionals. Presumably they understand that their words have a different weight or merit in the way people perceive them. And people perceive what they're saying generally, rightfully or wrongfully, as truth. It doesn't help when you're saying there's 2 shots, you clearly hear 2 shots, and we have the recordings, and here they are. that's inciting violence. That's like saying I didn't shoot the gun, I just loaded it and handed it to somebody to go rob a bank. You know exactly what you're doing when you're saying things like that, in my opinion. You can't be an attorney and not have any idea that it's going to incite people to react violently, as the Black Panthers so aptly put it. Put white America was on notice, and the government didn't do their job, so they were going to do it. And then you're telling these people who are going to go do the job of the government, by the way, George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin twice. You kind of have to believe, you would have to suspend disbelief to think that somebody would have no idea what the effects of something like that would be. So,
you know what, Robert? Robert,
yeah.
Robert, let's hear the. I'm gonna go to a break, and let's hear the original unedited 911 call from your brother.
Okay.
Sanford Police Department. Line is being recorded. Sean.
Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. It's Retrieve View Circle. The best address I can give you is 111 Retrieve View Circle. This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining, and he's just walking around looking about.
Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic?
He looks black.
Did you see what he was wearing?
Yeah, a dark hoodie, like a gray hoodie, and either jeans or sweatpants and white tennis shoes. He's here now. He was just staring.
Oh, he's just walking around the area?
At all the houses.
Okay.
And now he's just staring at me.
Okay, and so it's 1111 Retrieve You or 111?
That's the clubhouse.
That's the clubhouse. Do you know what he's near the clubhouse right now?
Yeah, now he's coming towards me.
Okay.
He's got his hand in his waistband. And he's a black male.
Okay. How old would you say he looks?
He's got a button on his shirt. Late teens.
Late teens, okay.
Something's wrong with him. Yeah. He's coming to check me out. He's got something in his hands. I don't know what his deal is.
Okay, just let me know if he does anything, okay?
Over here.
Yeah, we got him on the way. Just let me know if this guy does anything else.
Okay. These assholes, they always get away. Yeah. When you come to the clubhouse, you come straight in and make a left. Actually, you would go past the clubhouse.
Okay, it says on the left-hand side from the clubhouse?
No, you go in straight through the entrance, and then you make a left. Yeah, you go straight in, don't turn and make a left. Shit, he's running.
He's running? Which way is he running?
Down towards the other entrance of the neighborhood.
Okay, which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Okay.
All right, sir, what is your name?
It's George. He ran.
All right, George, what's your last name?
Zimmerman.
And George, what's the phone number you're calling from?
407-435-2400.
All right, George, we do have them on the way. Do you want to meet with the officer when they get out there?
Yeah.
All right, where are you going to meet with them at?
If they come in through the gate, tell them to go straight past the clubhouse and straight past the clubhouse and make a left. And then they go past the mailboxes. They'll see my truck.
Okay, what address are you parked in front of?
I don't know. It's a cut through, so I don't know the address.
Okay, do you live in the area?
Yeah.
Well, what's your apartment number?
It's a home. It's 1950. Oh, crap. I don't want to give it out loud. I don't know where this kid is.
Okay, do you want to just meet with him right near the mailboxes, then?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, George, I'll let him know to meet you with you out there, okay?
Actually, could you have him call me and I'll tell him where I'm at?
Okay, yeah, that's no problem.
You need my number? You got it.
Yeah, I got it. 407-435-2400.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, no problem. I'll let them know to call you when they're in the area.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, you know what? When I listen to that, I listen to a man that's concerned about his community. That's what I hear. Okay? I don't hear anything different. Robert, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, at the most basic level, you hear someone who didn't call the police because someone was black. The first thing they said is they gave context to their call. There's been a lot of break-ins here recently. There's someone I don't recognize, doing things that don't seem to make sense to me, considering it's raining. He was asked what this person's race was. He was asked what this person's attire was. What are they wearing? That's what dispatchers do. And then it became by those who would have you believe that the white racist murderer called the police because a black person in a hoodie was walking. It evolved into that, and it never was the case. I think later when George clarifies and he goes, yes, he's black, he's able to do that because he's now able to make an accurate assessment of this person's race. He wasn't even sure of the person's race when he called 911.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back with Robert Zimmerman Jr. Got a lot of callers on hold.
Randy.
Hey, Randy.
Yes, sir.
I think Robert was saying he does have to take off here before the break, but on a lighter note,
I don't know if you have a 978-595 caller, but they've tweeted me that they're trying to call in. I don't know if you have it up on your screens. I don't know how it works. It's a 978-595 number. It's possible. I've got about 100 callers on my screen. So okay.
Robert, why don't you hang tight? We're gonna take a quick break and hang tight.
Okay.
To the Randy Hahn agenda. We are live here, and we have our special guest, Robert Zimmerman Jr., the brother of George Zimmerman. So I'm just going to go down the line. If you're an idiot, I'm going to just cut you off. So, all right, caller, you're up. Go ahead.
Hi, Robert.
Hi.
Oh, okay, I'm on Robert. This is Joey P. I've been on the line for quite a while, and I'm glad to be able to speak to you. I think you're doing a great job advocating for your brother George and your family. Excellent job. I just wanted to say that, I could talk about a million things because this case is so huge, but I will key in on George's innocence. I can probably rifle off no less than 100 lies that have been told about George or about what happened that night, and it's just I find it real funny that not funny, but wrong word, but I find it interesting that people can just keep repeating these lies, and people believe it. The media, I don't know if they believe it or not, but they keep reporting it. And when the truth actually comes out, suddenly the media just disappears. They either don't report it or they bury it. You know what I'm saying, Robert?
Right. Of course.
So, anyway,
one thing I've learned about the media really likes to be wrong. Does not like it all to be wrong.
Oh yes, that's for sure. And by reporting the truth, they'd be kind of like impeaching themselves or whatever. And I know they don't want to do that. And I personally think that not only the media, but the state, Ronnie DeLaronda, DeLeonda, Crump, Natalie Jackson, and, you know, I know it's kind of taboo, but even the parents, you know, I think they just buried in so deep. I mean, I personally think that something's going to give way soon. Something has to give way soon because they have proof of absolutely nothing. Zilch, nothing. And I think this whole case is a fallacy, and I can't believe for the life of me that it's gone on this long. I think it's absolutely pathetic.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling. I hope there's resolution, obviously sooner rather than later in this case, and I hope that. Here's what I really hope, that when there is resolution, that we actually accept the answers from the court that we find out in court, that we don't, you know, there's some evidence now that's presented in court, and then detractors of George will just say, well, it was just photoshopped, you know, or George was beaten up, and then they say, well, it wasn't really that bad, you know, or there's evidence, there's DNA here or there, and then suddenly everybody's a DNA expert, and then, you know, well, the fight never happened. So ultimately, one day there will be resolution. There always is in our system, and I hope that we're ready to accept the answers, whatever answer that may be that comes out. Obviously, I'm of the inclination that the truth was always spoken by George, and that the truth will come out in court and exonerate George. Obviously, clearly, that's my opinion, but I'm not going to be able to stop people and how they may react or what they may do if that is the resolution that the justice system prescribes in this situation, from doing what they may do. And I think we'll really be missing the mark as a society and setting ourselves back culturally, because the whole world will be watching if we don't honor our own judicial system and its findings.
Yeah, Robert, I think you make a good point, and let's bring up our next caller here. All right, caller, you're live.
Hi, how are you? This is Joe. I'm calling from New York.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, yeah, George, we were just talking on Twitter. Don't be put off by the suggestive Twitter name. I just want to share my story. I run a website that is about race-based issues, and we covered the whole Trayvon killing. And we had one of our guys who works for the website protest at the University of Southern Indiana. There was a Black Power vigil where they were holding up Black Power fists. And my one friend, who was a white man, regardless of whether Mr. Zimmerman's non-white Hispanic or not, we support his right to be innocent until proven guilty. And as a result of this, I got emails from the new Black Panther affiliates and just angry black and white people in general, who were threatening to not only take my life, but also hack my credit card information, all these kind of things, just because we suggested that we should let the judicial system play itself out. But it's a mainstream media bias. You know, notice, like, I know one of the callers said, you know, Mr. Zimmerman wasn't a white man, so the story went away. You know, they don't cover the thousands of interracial crimes where it's young black men attacking non-young black men. And, you know, they assume Mr. Zimmerman's a white racist because a black man gets killed. I was just curious what your thought is on interracial crime and how that works. And I thank you. You know, you're a well-spoken guy. I've seen you on all over the news, Piers Morgan too, and I can tell you guys come from such a good family, and thanks for doing what you do. But what do you think about the media double standards as it pertains to interracial crime?
You know, first of all, thanks for your call. I think that the media, there's kind of another catchphrase that I've learned, so to speak, in all of this, which is, if it bleeds, it leads, you know. And I think that social media is kind of a double-edged sword, a blessing and a curse at the same time, because what the news used to be back in the days of Walter Cronkite was a fact-gathering organization that reported those facts. What the news has become now is, and this ties in your question because, you know, this is how we got to this devolution of the situation we find ourselves in now. What the news is now is people who are uninformed have social media accounts or Facebook pages or what have you. And so the news solicits from the uninformed what they want to hear. And that's how they get their some of their more salacious storylines, such as, for example, using the word coon, from social media. So people in media answer to or respond to, they don't answer to or respond to facts anymore, but they answer and respond to the uninformed. Now, obviously, the media has to pitch a narrative in the beginning, and they have to pitch the one that they're going to get the greater response from. But they are not pitching facts. They're not actually, one would hope that that's what they would do, is to start out with, here are the facts. What do you think? Join our discussion, write our blog, whatever. But in reality, what they do is they use three words. In this case, they use the word white, they use the word black, and they use the word gated community. And they made those words evolve into white vigilante racist, white self-appointed watch captain, or black became black hunted down black, or killed in cold blood black child. And then gated community is that's kind of the pepper in the soup. That adds the spice, because that makes it gated community, it means something to us, regardless of what race you are. It just has certain implications.
It's like a code word for white neighborhood. But let me ask you about the Eric Holder and the justice system and the new Black Panthers. Like I said, I know you guys were almost victims of their violence. There was the bounty, $5,000, whatever it was, and they were literally black power. How about what he did? Why does the Obama administration, particularly Eric Holder, turn a blind eye to what's going on with the new Black Panther Party and their violence and their voter intimidation? And I mean, they probably would have took a shot at your life and your family's life if they had the chance. What do you think this says about the Obama administration, their double standards? I mean, it makes no sense to me that they selectively prosecute things. I remember Eric Holder said, it would make his people look bad. Isn't that dangerous? I mean, they could have took a swipe at your life, or I don't know if you have children, or I know George has a wife. But that's it for me. Pass on well wishes. Say there's a lot of support for him in the communities, white, black, brown. We have big-time support for him, and I wish you guys safety and prosperity. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks so much. And let me just try to touch on that point about what does that say about Eric Holder? What does it say about Obama? If I respond to that before this resolution in this case, the criticism will ultimately be, I'm just biased, I'm his brother. Or if I criticize an attorney general or a president who happened to be black or of mixed race, as the president presumably is, then I'm a racist. So what I'm going to do is let the facts come out in court, let this be resolved through the criminal justice system, and then ask those questions from the proper authorities myself, or George will have to ask those questions. Why did the government turn a blind eye? Why did the government look the other way? Why did the government stand by as these people went out and put a price on my head? And he'll have his time to do that in a much more credible place or position from which to ask those questions if he's found innocent of these charges, and if we get to that resolution quickly. But commenting now on, I think what that caller is trying to get on by that by the Attorney General saying the "my people" comment that he said about voter intimidation, is that this, race may color their judgment or cloud their judgment. I can't make that call yet. Let's see what happens in court. And if what happens in court was that the government abdicated its responsibility to my family, then we'll have a different conversation about that.
Yeah, that's great, Robert. Next caller, you're up. You're up, caller. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello. Hi.
Am I on?
Yes,
you're on the air.
Yes, I wanted to ask Robert. He keeps saying that you can find all the evidence that has been released on gzlegal.com, and that's not true. They're only putting the stuff out that makes George look good. That there's tons of evidence in discovery, witness interviews. In fact, on GZ Legal, they don't even have the second part of witness number 6 interview where he changes.
Look, man, I'm going to tell you right now, okay? Look, Robert might not say it, but I'm going to say it. Trayvon Martin was nothing but a thug, okay? That's what he was. He was a thug, okay? He ran with gangs, and if you look at the slideshow there, you'll see what he did to George. Okay, I'm not playing with these black racists anymore. Okay, I'm not doing it. Okay, I don't care.
Let me, Randy, the case, actually, the website for the case is gzlegalcase.com, and I respect your opinion, that you've come to that opinion. I think that, like I was saying before about the Attorney General and the President, we may actually all find out a lot more about Trayvon and be in a more credible place to express our opinion when our opinion is informed by fact. And there are things that will come to light in court naturally, as they do in every case, in every self-defense case, about who the purported assailant is. In this case, obviously, the defendant will take the position the assailant, the person who violated the law by assailing someone else, would be Trayvon Martin. So in any case, criminal case like that, who they are, their reputation is relevant, and it will come to light, and there will be a time for that. So I would encourage people, listening, just wait till that. If what you're saying is true, which it's not my opinion, and like you said, I wouldn't say it. That's your opinion. You'll have much better grounds to say that it is when those things are revealed about Trayvon in an official capacity through the official means, through court. But if we just name call now anybody for any reason, it's not only going to turn people off, but it's going to give them the wrong idea. And if we ask people not to come to conclusions about George based on rhetoric, but rather on evidence, then we have to insist upon the same standard for Trayvon Martin. And when that evidence is brought to light in court, we can start to better inform our conclusions then.
Robert, I would agree, and I would want to say we only have about a few minutes left tonight. I want to say you've done an excellent job. Let's go through here and see if we can't get some of these callers on. All right, caller, you're on.
Hi, Randy. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, it's Kat.
Hi, Kat.
I was hoping to get in before the last 3 minutes expired, so if you could keep me in the queue.
Yeah, well, we can continue, so.
Hi, Kat, it's Robert.
Hi, Robert. Good to meet you. I've been listening through the entire broadcast, and, I'm really enjoying listening to all the points you're presenting. When I initially started hearing about the case, go ahead. Do you need to speak?
No, I'm listening. Yeah, when you initially started hearing about the case.
Okay. It was also biased, and all it seemed was the media was trying to present your brother as guilty before even, any of the evidence was presented. And I just became so disheartened with the whole news broadcasting of it that I just quit listening to it because it, and even following different feeds on Twitter, I'm not even going to even mention who I was following that were making different statements. Even they were stating your brother as guilty and Trayvon as being this innocent young teenage boy who was simply just going to the store for, like they said, Skittles and iced tea, which, from what I could gather, even though they were presenting it as your brother being guilty, from what I could hear from those recorded calls he was making, I could see his concern for that housing community that he was watching over that evening, even if he wasn't officially, it sounds like, on watch that night. It just seems like they were presenting him as guilty before even proven innocent. It was just wrong. So I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, I've been in this. Many of us have been in the situation where we're kind of in this sticky situation where we have a police dispatcher on the phone who's directing police to our location, who is trying to ascertain in incredible detail what's going on there. Not just a tire, but what exactly is this person doing? Did a suspect run into a home and shoot someone? Did a suspect run into a home and close the door where they presumably live? Did a suspect run into a home and say, hey, guys, the cops are on the way and 8 people ran out? Did a suspect turn the corner and there were cops already there waiting for them because they were committing some other crime? So I think when we're in that situation, we try to give a really, really good description to the person we're talking to, because in our minds they work for the police, about what's going on. And I think that many people can relate to that, because everybody at one point in their lives or another has called the police. I know my brother. I know clearly he was concerned for his community. More has come to light to show as to why someone like my brother would be concerned in that kind of community. And more will yet come to light as time goes on, and it'll come to light in the right venue. But I would just remind people, that when we're in that situation, we feel that we're the eyes and ears of the police on the ground. We may be doing things, that we're not trained to do, following someone or anything that you think you're doing your best as a citizen to help out the police, but the person who's more trained on the line is the person with much more experience than the caller. And I think the dispatcher there did the right thing. Heard a potentially dangerous situation. They ended up being right. We don't need you to do that. And I think my brother did the right thing. When you listen objectively to the call, he says, okay, he stops, and then, says he ran. I don't know where he is. He's gone. So more will come to light in court, but just keep an open mind about everyone. We've all called the police. Keep an open mind about what your actions are or what your description is when you have the police on the line.
Robert, let me ask you something. Are you surprised from all the support out there in America tonight? I mean, really.
I'm encouraged by it. I'm encouraged by it. A lot of the degree to which people support our family and George specifically is overwhelming. I'm mostly encouraged and very honored by the support that we've received from law enforcement, from all over the country, and from military, retired veterans, active duty. I think they see what's going on here. I think that I would suspect that the Chief of Police, Bill Lee, might have been receiving the same kind of, well, we know now that he was receiving the same kind of emails that I get. Keep up the good fight, keep fighting the good fight. This is about people's rights. It's about your oath, or in my situation, it's about your family. And I'm so encouraged that the support has no color, no creed, no socioeconomic distinction necessarily, and I don't do broadcasts that are only right wing, left wing, center. I select them. I'm selective about them, obviously, because I want to see that they're interested in facts and that I'm not just going to go on something to get hate calls or hate speech or whatever. But I'll take a question from anybody, and I don't begrudge you for having a different opinion. I always redirect people.
Well, we have a few guests up. Robert, I would like to tell you we had 70,000 listeners tonight.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really good. It's incredible. Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me on with 70,000 people listening.
Yeah, 70,000. All right. Caller, you're up. Caller, you're up. And caller, you're on. All right, 936, you're up.
Randy, I think some of them are dropping off. They think the show's over.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's 2 a.m. I have to wrap it up. You guys have to do your wrap. Well, thanks, Deidre and Lauren and Randy. It was great chatting tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robert. You were a great guest, and thank you for your hospitality. Man, it was great.
I appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch, Randy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Robert.
Keep the faith, Robert. Okay?
Thanks, Deidre. Appreciate it. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night, guys.
All right, good night.